So Irene, you're gonna do the land acknowledgement if Amy doesn't show up? Okay, okay, fine. Amy's coming. Let's just wait for Amy. I can see her. I can see her coming. Yeah, I know. Lassie, good morning. My name is Pam Griffin-Hody. I'm a lay leader. My pronouns are she and her. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Universalist Unitarian community of Halifax. Our minister, the Reverend Ben Robbins, is off today. And the service is being brought to you today by our Reconciliation and Dismantling Racism Committee. We are people of many paths who are brave, curious, and compassionate thinkers and doers. We are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, and spirituality, but are aligned in our desire to make a difference for the good. We have radical roots and a history as self-motivated spiritual people. We think for ourselves and we recognize that life experience is the strongest influence on our beliefs. And if you're new here, we welcome you. There will be a time to chat after the service with coffee. And if you want to introduce yourself now, somebody can bring the microphone to you. We welcome everybody that's joining us on Zoom as well. I can't see the number very well from here, but it's in the double digits. And if you'd like to be on our email distribution list, there's a book at the back in that room, which we call the ballroom. And I draw your attention to the announcements in the order of service, and I would like to highlight the Thanksgiving potluck, which will be on Monday, the 5th of, no, that's the wrong date, sorry. I'm looking for it. The 13th, Thanksgiving Day, 3 o'clock, and the sign-up sheets are in the back, or you can talk to Faith or email Faith.
The sign-up sheet is making the rounds.
Oh, the sign-up sheets currently are in this room, going around with a pen, which will only work if somebody doesn't keep the pen after using it. Just saying. Anyway, after the service, it will be somewhere else. And this evening, or not really this evening, late this afternoon at 4 o'clock, that's a new time, and it's a new time because we have a choir that's renting the building on Sunday evenings. And it's a spirit circle, and that's always the last Sunday of each month, and it will be at 4 o'clock in here today. And Amy Moonshadow has our landing. Oh.
That's what it says in the service.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I thought it was Amy.
So did I.
But Amy has our chalice lighting immediately following the land acknowledgement. Irene. Just be careful of my. Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's okay. Just got it.
Okay.
We, each of us, respond
to the land acknowledgements in a different way. In the past, when I have thought of them, I have thought of the season and what many of us no longer think of, like foraging the land. So because it was fall, I might have cited the benefits of wild rose hips. But this is a special year. It happens to be the 300th anniversary of the signing of the peace and friendship treaties between the Micmac and the Crown. And it is also 10 whole years, a decade, since the Truth and Reconciliation Committee released 94 calls to action, which many of us have learned about since. Both are reminders that nowadays we are all treaty people, living in community today with people with whom we must learn to share knowledge, changing care for our globally warming planet, and we need to build relationships with many people in many new ways.
There's no chalice? I thought you were bringing a chalice. Just a chalice.
I apologize. I'm late, and I thought I was doing the Truth and Reconciliation thing, and so I don't have a chalice lighting thing, so I will, if there's a book here, we'll find something. What number can you think of right away?
I don't know, the retort. Started about 452.
I'll do it, probably do it quickly, because it's pretty fine print. How about this one?
Where's the mic? I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do.
Thank you, Amy. I'll light the chalice. She didn't want to take today. There we go. Our opening hymn is 318, but the words will be up on the screen. We are one. We would be one. I mixed up opening words and opening hymns, so we're off to a good start. Bear with us. We're amateurs. Ben will be back next week. Tuesday, September 30th, is the National Day to recognize survivors and victims of residential schools. This is a very new day, and it very weirdly connects in Nova Scotia with October 1st, which is Treaty Day. When the federal government announced about 3 years ago now that Reconciliation Day would be held on what had unofficially been Orange Shirt Day, I was a bit annoyed at them for seemingly once again ignoring the most important province because it mixed up with Treaty Day. But the choice of that day wasn't arbitrary. On September 30th, 1973, Phyllis Jack Webstead arrived at a residential school in Burns Lake, BC, about 500 kilometers from her home, and she was 6 years old at the time. And they took away her brand new orange shirt. And that was her introduction to all of the horrors that followed. And the photo of orange shirt banners on the order of service is from Williams Lake, which is very close to Phyllis's home community. Shubenacadie Residential School outside Truro closed in 1967, a few years before Phyllis's first day of school. But in the decades following, Indigenous children in Nova Scotia were placed in foster care at a rate exponentially higher than the general population, 21% in 2014 compared to 4% of non-Indigenous children. October the 1st being recognized as Treaty Day in Nova Scotia was not arbitrary either. The date was established in the 1752 Peace and Friendship Treaty. The 1752 treaty is a renewal of several previous ones, as Irene mentioned, the first one being in 1725. There's actually going to be a huge 300th anniversary celebration on October the 4th. There's some details in the newsletter, and you can find more details online. And it is this 1752 treaty that is being used in current court proceedings. And if you're geeky enough and you want to read all the entire treaty, or all of the treaties, they're on the Nova Scotia Archives website, and they very, very nicely have transcribed it, so you don't have to try to decipher 18th century handwriting. And there's one little part of this that I'll read. That to cherish a good harmony and mutual correspondence between the said Indians and this government, His Excellency hereby promises on the part of His Majesty that the said Indians shall upon the first day of October yearly, so long as they shall continue in friendship, renew this treaty. And those of us whose ancestors came from other places to settle this land have not honored this treaty well through the centuries. And even the most recent of newcomers have profited from broken treaties. And there are hundreds of different treaties across Canada for which the same can be said. There are 94 calls to action in the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. Number 80 was to establish the statutory holiday that was only established a few years ago, established very quickly, because all of a sudden they started finding the unmarked graves at the residential schools. And people that hadn't even noticed the 2015 report couldn't not notice that on the news. Another thing that came from the Truth and Reconciliation report that I didn't even know about until I was looking up some stuff this week, so I thought I'd share this. That on June 21st, 2021, which is just 4 years ago, the oath of Canadian citizenship was changed. And I mean, if we never say it, and those of us that said it a long time ago, or those of us who have never had to say it, it's just said by new Canadians and also by federal civil servants. And it now includes, after the bit that was there before, that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada. This was added, including the Constitution, which recognizes and affirms the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. That is now in the Oath of Citizenship. So, we will now take the time to recognize our collective and individual joys and sorrows and complex truths. And we bring our hearts into the sacred space of community, and we open them up to each other, for each other, so that those of us who carry pain might be comforted by the presence of a loving community, so that those of us who are happy and well might share our joy and see it multiply in others. And so those of us who carry complex truths might find a welcoming space to process and make meaning of all that life brings. So if you have a story, a joy, sorrow, or complex truth on your heart that needs to be spoken in community, we invite you to share, and we invite you to drop a stone to mark your story and to remind you that you are not alone. And we use the handheld mic because the people on Zoom cannot hear you in the sanctuary unless you're on the mic. If you can come up and face that way, then the people on Zoom can actually see you. If you cannot, then someone will bring the microphone around. Yellow light off to use hand mic. I'm going to drop the first stone in memory of all of the victims and survivors of residential schools in Canada. And I'm going to drop a second one for my complex truth of today, as today is my 40th wedding anniversary. And I've been a widow for almost 7 years. It's still my 40th anniversary. 40 years since they tacked that hyphen Hody onto my name.
Given the day, I'll add a complex truth as well. For those of you who don't already know me and have not already had to listen to me, my name is Andrew, and amongst the many things that I'm doing when I am not here is working at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, just down on Lower Water Street. And for the past several years, we have had an exhibit on display there that was built with the assistance and, well, actually really with the assistance of us, by members of the Mi'kmaq community here, called How Unique We Still Are. And talking with tourists through that exhibit about things such as the peace and friendship treaties and etc., one thing that I have noticed this summer, as opposed to last summer and the summer before, is that visitors from away have started to become interested in that history and where we are now and where we are going. And that change from visitors who are coming from all different parts of the world is noticeable, both in that it shows that we still have a long way yet to go, but also in that in some ways, for good and for ill, we are kind of leading the way for a lot of other people.
Last night, rather late, I received an email from a long-standing friend in Leipzig, Germany, Ute Zocke Hertling, who has been, I started corresponding with in 1957 and have met her 3 times, and as recently as 2 years ago when I visited her in Leipzig. She lost her daughter yesterday. So I put a stone in there for her.
We also have Judy online as well, too.
Okay.
Unmute. Thank you. All right. This seems like an appropriate day to acknowledge my dear friend Ruth Ann Galera, who, at the age of 12, led her siblings away from an abusive family on reserve. And there were 6 children, younger and older, and they all had different placements. So when I met her in, I think about 1982, she was trying to find her siblings, and it took her years. I don't know. I think I was with her when she met the last sibling playing in a piano bar. But she managed finally to find all of them and to forge good relationships with all of them, to reassert those relationships. And in addition, since I've known her, she has become more and more aware of her own Native history, because they didn't get that. So, yeah. So I just want to acknowledge Ruth Ann.
Now we'll place another stone, final stone, for the joys and sorrows and complex truths that we hold in our hearts. So every Sunday, I cut and forgot to paste my words for the offertory. So now you're getting winging it. Every Sunday we pass around the collection plate to help do the work of this congregation. Your not measured by what you can and cannot give, but it does cost money to keep the lights on. Most people contribute by monthly pledge, but we do pass the plate around. Today's collection goes to work with this community. And if you would like to donate by e-transfer at any time, it's so easy. It's treasurer@uuch.ca. So if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, gee, I really should give an extra $10 to them because I'm just in a mood and I think that would really help, just do it. Your phone's right there beside you.
It should be.
That's what you get when I wing it. Our offertory hymn is 1023, Building Bridges, and the words will be on the screen. And then immediately following that, Margaret has a reading.
This reading is from Judy Wilson-Raybould's book, True Reconciliation, How to Be a Force for Change. She is an important Indigenous leader, former regional chief of the BC Assembly of First Nations. Of course, she was also a former Minister of Justice in Justin Trudeau's government. She says in a few paragraphs from the book's introduction, and I quote, "Reconciliation is sometimes used to refer to building proper relationships, including repairing and healing the wrongs that have happened. For example, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples talked about how getting on with the work of reconciliation requires a great cleansing of the wounds of the past. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC, defined reconciliation as establishing and maintaining a mutually respectful relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples in this country. For that to happen, there has to be awareness of the past, acknowledgement of the harm that has been inflicted, atonement for the causes, and action to change behavior." She continues, "I believe there are three core principles or practices of true reconciliation: learn, understand, and act. These practices are interrelated and interconnected. They build on each other, yet they should also be operable in our lives at the same time. They are not linear. To be clear, these practices also have specific expressions and meanings. It is not about any learning or any understanding or any action. I mean something very particular about each of these, and how they are practiced will be distinct for individuals, communities, organizations, and governments. I'm not going to define, learn, understand, and act yet, but I invite you to imagine what you think they mean and how they may relate to what you are doing already. What is your initial reaction to them? Do the definitions seem obvious to you? Food for thought.
The theme that I chose for this reflection is the path to reconciliation, doing our own work. Driving in this morning, I was very pleased to hear on our wonderful public broadcaster, CBC, announcement that there would be special programming through the day on Tuesday to observe National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So they're going to have a whole range of programming that day, which we can listen to. But it also reflects the fact that this is really a topic which is front and center in Canada. For a long time, we have begun our services, and I may have to use a flashlight. My eyes are not all that good. For a long time, we've begun our services with the land acknowledgement that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq people and are still subject to the peace and friendship treaties settlers entered into with them in the 18th century. We also have recognized the grave injustices done to Indigenous people when settlers failed to live up to the terms of these treaties. We also have readily accepted that this calls us to pursue truth, healing, and reconciliation with First Nations people. While these initial steps are important and necessary, the challenging work of transforming our good intentions into true reconciliation remains largely before us. We often are uncertain what the true reconciliation really means, and Judy Wilson-Raybould invites us to really reflect on that. Then we all too often turn to the First Nations people to lead us down the path to reconciliation. This, folks, is not the true path, not the right path. Indigenous people have their own struggle with reconciliation. Of course, I do not speak for Indigenous people, but I trust I can legitimately share with you what I have come to understand about their struggle with reconciliation. What do they need to reconcile with us? We are the ones who violated the treaties, failed to appreciate the culture, ingenuousness, and humanity, and violently subjugated and abused them. Over several hundred years, the colonies of British North America and then Canada did their darndest to extinguish the culture, language, and way of life of First Nations people through many, among other many actions, the residential school system and the 60s scoop. The result has been that First Nations people have had to work hard to recover what they nearly lost. It has been an arduous and often painful journey to regain their real identity and to maintain their culture and communities. One such journey is documented in a powerful and touching book written by Andrea Curry. She was taken in the 60s scoop from her Indigenous mother by birth by child welfare authorities in Manitoba and adopted out to a white family. Andrea is a member of this congregation and has written a book entitled Finding Otipemisiwak, The People Who Own Themselves. It's her personal story about how she has pursued regaining her identity. And it has been a book that has been important for her own healing. But it's also been a generous and very courageous gift to the settler community because it helps us to understand the truth that we must deal with. Andrea, for many years, has worked as a psychotherapist in First Nation communities in Cape Breton. She dealt daily with the trauma that many of them have experienced as First Nations people. We must never lose sight of that traumatic psychological and social consequences of our treatment of Canada's Indigenous people. On the other hand, it is remarkable and a testament to the strength and resilience of Indigenous peoples that so many of them have survived and are still willing to generously share their culture and wisdom with us despite everything. Thus, when we naively look to Indigenous folks to show us the path to reconciliation, it's no wonder that they feel exasperated with us and more than a little let down. Then they tell us, you must do your own work. You must do your own work. This is where our path to reconciliation begins in earnest, doing our own work, i.e. coming to terms with the complexities of healing, the wounds of the past and present injustices. So, how are we going to get on with doing our own work? We cannot simply undo past injustices because their consequences are complexly intertwined within every economic, social, and political structure that is modern Canada. Everyone arrives at 2025 with their own complex baggage. Moreover, all who make their home in this country are treaty people and thus share the responsibility to heal the wounds of injustice and contribute to reconciliation, even recent immigrants. And as Pam pointed out, the oath that people take is now put this into our formal procedures. The meaning of true reconciliation was addressed in the reading by Jody Wilson-Raybould. She organizes her book into those three big steps: learn, understand, and act. That is the path to reconciliation, and she involved, but I have altered it just slightly and identified four sort of big steps. One, learn about the truth. Develop an understanding of and respect for the Indigenous worldview, culture, and national and values. And three, bring Indigenous people into our national dialogue and governance at every level. Finally, find ways to share the wealth of Canada such that they are justly compensated for their losses over several centuries. So let's look briefly at those four things. Learning. While Indigenous folks do not want to be asked to lead settlers to reconciliation, they are more than glad to share their stories and wisdom. This comes to us through a rich variety of articles, books, social media and public presentations, visual arts, cinema and theater, and testimony before royal commissions, public inquiries, and legal proceedings. The truth is there for us to learn about. We should note that this congregation has worked actively for quite a few years to develop relationships with Mi'kmaq people and communities. For example, we've had a relationship with the Bear River First Nation down near Digby. We have sought to be trusted supporters who welcome opportunities to learn from them about Mi'kmaq culture and ceremonies and to participate in activities that they sponsor. We should continue this practice of relationship building and partnership. Something else we can do to encourage learning about reconciliation is to produce an annotated bibliography of sources that members have discovered, read, or perhaps viewed, and can recommend others in our community. This probably is a job for the Reconciliation and Dismantling Racism group, to put something together that can lead people to those sources. I suppose another one would be to have a book club or a book meeting group that investigates and reads about indigenous works of that have been published. That would be one way to learn further about it. I just finished reading a book which provides 52 ways to reconcile, how to walk with indigenous people on the path to healing. It is written by David Robertson, and it provides one reconciliation activity for each week of the year. There's plenty of ideas. So in terms of understanding, this is a matter of integrating what one learns into a coherent understanding that actively informs one's actions in new ways. In this way, in this case, understanding the experience of indigenous people and appreciating their worldview, culture, humanity, and rights. It also means living in right relationship to each other. In other words, to enjoy a comfortable, just, and supportive relationship. Jody Wilson-Raybould calls for us to become what she calls in-betweeners. It's a term I have usually identified with another pair of words, inside-outsiders, which I've experienced being in a number of contexts. It means being able to operate from a basis of experience and knowledge in several different worlds with different worldviews, and perhaps seeing more clearly how to challenge, elevate, and advance true reconciliation. It's an interesting concept and offers an important way we may be able to position ourselves and our UU community as genuine partners with the Mi'kmaq people and their communities and other indigenous peoples. I also would submit that our UU experience with becoming a welcoming church for the LGBTQ2+ community has a lot of similarities. It involved all of us becoming engaged and understanding what that meant. As a whole congregation, this should be what we do in this case as well, something that we take to our heart deeply. So in terms of government action and governance, Wilson-Raybould views two tracks of necessary government action. One is to tackle the day-to-day states of poverty, marginalization, and crisis that many indigenous people and communities themselves face. The second one is to end the denial of indigenous rights and shift to relations based on the recognition of inherent rights of self-government. That is part of the political, legal, and governance dimensions of reconciliation. I would add that we should see and hear Indigenous involvement in every level of governance in Canada, such that they are equal partners with all the people of this land, all treaty people. And I'm pleased to say that more and more, as I listen to the news, I hear references to the involvement of Indigenous people at various levels of governance in this country. Our role in UUCH as in-betweeners will then be to offer our active civic and political support in all possible ways. This is not to say it will always be easy, which was the case with the recent fisheries dispute between Indigenous fishers and other participants in that sector. However, if we can engage in a dialogue with each other on complicated issues based on deep knowledge, mutual respect, and genuine caring, then there is more than likely a positive outcome. Wilson-Raybould's action mantra is true reconciliation challenges, elevates, and advances. Finally, sharing the wealth. The issue of how in Canada today we can compensate Indigenous people for all that they have lost and suffered over the centuries is a big, big question, and it's more than we can handle in this talk today. A full addressing of it really needs to be taken up in another form and perhaps in other reflections. But I would just say this much, that land acknowledgements have taken place, others are still being, land settlements have been taking place, and more are underway. Some compensation has been paid to Indigenous victims of crime and human rights violations, but not nearly enough, if we're not nearly inclusive enough. To go forward, we need to find ways to fairly share the wealth of Canada, provide equal access to the opportunities of this land. A hopeful book that I read recently called Indigenomics, Taking a Seat at the Economic Table, is written by Carol Ann Hilton. She has an MBA and is a faculty member at Royal Roads University School of Business on Vancouver Island, I think it is. She paints a positive picture of the growing involvement of Indigenous peoples in Canada as key economic actors and entrepreneurs. In 2021, for example, the ownership of Clearwater Seafood in Nova Scotia, one of Canada's largest seafood enterprises, became an equal partnership between premium brands and a coalition of 7 Mi'kmaq communities in Atlantic Canada. This is the kind of development that Ms. Hilton is pointing towards. Moreover, nation-building projects that the Canadian government is starting to roll out speak promisingly about the involvement of First Nations people and communities. However, we need to keep an eye on this proposed action to ensure that that really happens as promised. So far, all we've got is words. So finally, may the path toward true reconciliation with our Indigenous brothers and sisters move forward, and may we in the Halifax UU community join together to do our part. Thank you. If there's any time for comments, is there?
Yeah, a little bit.
Somebody have anything they want to say? Yes, Irene.
About,
Use the microphone.
need the microphone.
Yeah, the yellow light has to be off.
Okay. 25 years ago, Andrea Curry was a member of this congregation. So that's when you hear her name here, you need to remember that. And she was also a member of For the Moment, a wonderful singing group.
She has been in touch with us frequently about reconciliation, and because I had mentioned her name in what I said, I had sent a copy to her so that she knew what I was going to say about her, and asked her what her response was to what I was saying. I was very, very relieved and pleased that she thought it was okay. Any other comments? Sripat.
About 3 months ago, I was in Montreal, and I went to a museum whose name, unfortunately, I cannot remember. But that museum had a floor of exhibits about Indigenous culture, history, communities, and so on. And that was quite interesting because there were many exhibits about day-to-day lives of Indigenous people. And I often thought that there might be many short videos on YouTube that are similar in nature, that are about indigenous lives and cultures and so on. So perhaps we could play a short video like that in most services. I've heard the land acknowledgement for years and years and years. I don't think it has kind of outlived its purpose, I believe, because it does keep repeating what we already know rather than learn something new and understand something new. So watching, if there are such YouTube kind of videos once a week, might tell us something more that we don't know. It might humanize indigenous people rather than just an abstract concept.
Thank you for that comment, Shripad. I think that's a good idea. If you have a link to anything, please send it to me. And we'll consider that, yes.
Need the microphone.
My nephew was Mi'kmaq. My brother-in-law and sister adopted him when he was 5.5 months old, and he had cystic fibrosis. He died when he was 34, and I was there with him. So I have a very strong feelings about all this stuff, and I try to learn as much as I can, but there are 2 television channels that on television that show a lot of stuff, you know, to teach the rest of us, you know. Anyway, look it up. They're really good.
Aboriginal People's Television Network, APTN.
Yeah,
And there are programs on CBC, for example, On Reserve with Deerchild is her last name. Yeah. Yes. Anybody else?
I was just going to say that it's rare that I feel very inspired by many leaders I hear speak this day, but I was on a call with my daughter on this Rotary Club call, and he was speaking, Negan Sinclair, and he was very inspiring. It's the first time I was like, oh my God, I wish you could be like the Prime Minister. and he writes for the Winnipeg Free Press, and has also written a book, and just very inspired in terms of figuring out how to travel a path together. And yeah, so as someone to follow, I thought he was great.
What was the person's name?
Negan Sinclair.
That's the daughter of
Son of
Murray.
Son of Murray.
Son of Murray.
Yeah.
I've always been very deeply moved by the way in which Native people often speak, and the calm, thoughtful delivery. And I think we're more and more listening to that. We need to. Okay.
Our closing hymn is 1017, Building a New Way. The words are on the screen. If you like the music, I see somebody with a teal hymn book because they like to see the music. There are hymn books. our chalice today, I share the words of Becky Laurent. As breath to song, as flame is to spirit, so spirit is to breath, and breath to song. Though we extinguish the flame in this sanctuary, may we tend it in our hearts until we meet again. And I think the humanists are meeting here at noon, in here at noon.